4:37 local time, 20 nautical miles south of Sri Lanka. The Indian Ocean is not a body of water. It is a pressurized acoustic battlefield where silence is the only currency that matters. 400 feet below the glass-flat surface, 7,000 tons of nuclear-powered steel exists as nothing more than a hole in the water. This is a Los Angeles-class fast-attack submarine. To the world above, she is a ghost. To the Iris Dena, an Iranian Maj-class frigate patrolling overhead, she is a lethal enigma they are desperate to solve. The air in the submarine's control room is recycled, cold, and smells of ozone and concentrated focus. There is no shouting. There are no cinematic alarms. Only the steady, rhythmic pulse of the Dena's active sonar, a metallic ping that hammers against the submarine's hull like a finger tapping on a coffin lid. Each strike is a physical manifestation of a search warrant. The Iranian captain is zigzagging, burning fuel and straining sensors, desperately trying to reset the fire control solution before the American technicians can lock it down. On the waterfall displays, the Dena's signature is a jagged neon green scar creeping across the darkness. The tension is purely mathematical. Every 90 seconds, the Dena zigs, the acoustic data scatters, and the fire control team must rebuild the hypothesis from zero. It is a high-stakes game of connect the dots, where the dots are moving at 15 knots and the prize is survival. The Americans are not just watching a ship, they are dissecting a prey's heartbeat from miles away. The primary shield between the Ghost and the Hunter is the thermocline, a sharp, invisible boundary where the tropical warmth of the surface crashes into the frigid depths of the abyss. This layer acts as an acoustic prism, bending the Dena's sonar pings upward, reflecting them back to the surface and painting an empty ocean on the Iranian screens. But the ocean is breathing, the thermal shield is thinning, and the clock is starting to bleed. 5:13 local time. The ocean is changing. The expendable bathythermograph readings small probes launched to measure water temperature are returning a grim reality. The surface layer is warming. The thermocline, that invisible acoustic lens protecting the submarine, is thinning. It is no longer a solid wall. It is becoming a translucent veil. The sonar chief estimates they have less than 6 hours before the Dena's active pings begin to punch through the thermal layer and paint a perfect silhouette of the American hull on the Iranian consoles. But the Dena is not the primary threat. The real danger sits on her aft flight deck, an SH-3 Sea King anti-submarine helicopter. While the ship's hull sonar is hampered by its own engine noise and the physics of the surface layer, the Sea King is a surgical instrument. It is a predator that can hover, dipping a low-frequency transducer on a long cable directly through the thermocline. It doesn't need to look through the curtain. It walks behind it. The instant that dipping sonar splashes below the thermal boundary, the submarine's invisibility evaporates. It is the acoustic equivalent of a flashlight being switched on in a dark room. The American crew can hear the Sea King's rotors thumping through the water column, a low-frequency vibration that signals a narrowing window of opportunity. The tactical environment is degrading into a three-way race. The thinning thermal shield, the proximity of the 1-2 nautical mile territorial limit of Sri Lanka, and the fueling status of that helicopter. The commander stares at the waterfall display. To maintain the mission's objective, they must execute a strike before the Dena reaches the sanctuary of international law. But there is a massive obstacle. To receive the final go code, the submarine must do the one thing that goes against every instinct of a submariner. It must break the surface and expose its presence to the Dena's ASR 3D radar. The Ghost must briefly become flesh. 4:41 local time. The submarine is trapped in a tactical paradox. To execute the strike, the commander requires formal authorization from CENTCOM. At this depth, the only connection to the surface is via extremely low-frequency radio, the world's most expensive, lowest bandwidth text message. ELF can signal the boat to call home, but it cannot transmit the complex 256-bit encrypted targeting codes needed for a Mark 48 ADCAP launch. To get those codes, the boat must rise to periscope depth. Rising is a calculated violation of the environmental baseline. As the hull ascends, it sheds the protection of the thinning thermocline and enters the upper water column where the Dena's hull sonar is most lethal. Worse, Pushing a communications mast above the waterline creates a spike, a transient radar return that the Dina's ASR 3D radar is specifically tuned to detect. One sweep at the wrong microsecond and the invisible ghost becomes a target for a volley of Iranian anti-submarine mortars. The navigator identifies a desperate solution: a South Korean LNG tanker, a 200,000-ton leviathan of liquefied natural gas, plowing through the corridor 5 miles to the southeast. On every radar scope within 50 miles, this tanker appears as a massive, blinding blotch of electromagnetic energy. This is the radar shadowing tactic. By aligning the submarine's ascent on the exact line of bearing between the tanker and the Iris Dena, the submarine's mast will sit within the tanker's radar shadow. 4:48 local time. The geometry aligns. Prepare for ascent. The submarine rises. Flow noise builds against the hull as the thermal shield peels away. The pristine sonar environment is suddenly flooded with the cacophony of surface noise, the churning propellers of the tanker sounding like a freight train overhead. For a few high-stakes seconds, the mast breaks the surface. The satellite link locks. The encrypted traffic streams down. Authorization confirmed. The submarine immediately dives, the thermocline closing over it like a heavy steel door. They have the permission to kill. 4:51 local time. The Iris Dena is now 20 nautical miles offshore, tracking parallel to the coast. The 1-2-mile territorial sanctuary, the invisible line where international law turns a predator into a war criminal, sits only 8 miles to the north. If the Iranian captain suspects the ghost and turns toward shore, the mission evaporates. The window is closing. Inside the submarine's control room, the fire control team is wrestling with the geometry of attack. They are utilizing target motion analysis (TMA) to triangulate the Dena's exact course and speed from bearing-only data. On the screens, the green lines converge, a blurry photo slowly coming into focus. Every turn of the Dena's screw, every pitch of her hull against the Indian Ocean swells, is fed into the ballistic computer. The submarine's sharpest ear, the towed array hundreds of feet of sensitive hydrophone cable trailing far behind the boat, is currently providing the raw data. But there is a lethal trade-off. The moment a torpedo is launched, this array becomes a leash. High-speed maneuvers to evade a counterstrike could snap the cable, blinding the boat's best sensor at the most critical moment of the engagement. The captain is betting the integrity of his sensors against the life of his ship. 4:53 local time. The fire control solution reaches high confidence. The target is no longer a guess. It is a coordinate in 4D space. The weapon of choice is already warm in the tube. The Mark 48 ADCAP, Advanced Capability Heavyweight Torpedo. This isn't just a projectile. It is a 3,500-pound underwater drone powered by Auto-Fuel 2, capable of outrunning and outthinking almost anything afloat. Final bearing on Tube 1. Solution set. The room goes silent, waiting for the two words that change everything. 4:53 local time. The captain's voice is a low anchor in the quiet room. Shoot Tube 1. The transition to active combat begins with a trigger event. The torpedo tube floods thousands of pounds of seawater rushing in to equalize pressure. This creates a sharp acoustic transient, a gulp of the ocean that a trained Iranian sonar operator might recognize, like a parent recognizes a child's cry. The crew is betting everything that the chaotic symphony of the shipping lanes, the churning of the LNG tanker, and the clicking of a million snapping shrimp will drown out this one fatal heartbeat. The Mark 48 ADCAP drops from its cradle. There is no air bubble, no telltale surface splash. It is powered by Auto-Fuel 2, a monopropellant that requires no oxygen and produces no exhaust bubbles. It leaves no neon arrow on the surface pointing back to the submarine's location. Its pump jet propulsor, a shrouded fan designed for extreme stealth, eliminates the cavitation trail of traditional screws. A hair-thin guidance wire spools out from the back of the torpedo and the mouth of the tube, connecting the weapon to the fire control technician's console. Through this copper thread, the operator drives the torpedo from miles away, receiving a real-time sonar picture from the torpedo's nose. The submarine is now chained to its shot, frozen in depth and course to prevent the wire from snapping against the hull. At 55 knots, the Mark 48 is blinded by its own flow noise, the sound of water screaming past its sensors. It doesn't matter. The technician in the submarine is doing the thinking for it, steering the 3,500-pound Predator through the world's busiest shipping lanes, weaving between the massive hulls of merchant ships. 4 miles. 3 miles. The Denna pings again, her sonar sweeping over the incoming threat like a searchlight in the fog. To the Iranians, the return looks like a school of fish, a biologic error. But the fish is made of hardened steel and high explosives. 4:58 local time. 2 miles from the target, the Mark 48 wakes up. The fire control technician sends the final command through the guidance wire. Enable seeker. The torpedo slows down slightly, its flow noise drops, and its onboard sonar, a 2D phased array seeker, electronically steered, starts actively painting the water ahead with high-frequency pings. A 1,500-ton frigate pushing 15 knots of displaced water through the Indian Ocean is not a subtle target. The seeker locks onto the Iris Denna almost instantly. Terminal acquisition is achieved. The weapon accelerates for the final run, its pump jet screaming at a frequency that water cannot hide. Now, the Denna hears it. Somewhere in the Combat Information Center, CIC, of that ship, a sonar operator catches a sound that turns his blood to ice. The high-pitched, frantic chirp of an active torpedo seeker, closing fast, with a constant bearing. In naval warfare, a constant bearing doesn't mean the object is passing by. It means it is on a direct collision course. The alarm is hit. A siren wails through the Iranian ship's passageways, but mathematics dictate the outcome. Exactly 15 seconds separate that realization from total annihilation. The Denna carries acoustic decoys, small devices launched into the water designed to seduce torpedo seekers away from the hull. However, the process of recognizing the threat, authorizing countermeasures, and deploying them takes a trained crew longer than 15 seconds on their best day. A hard, evasive turn is physically impossible. A 1,500-ton frigate at 15 knots requires hundreds of meters of sea room to come about, and she has run out of distance. The triple 324mm torpedo launchers on the Denna's aft deck are useless now. To fire back, they need a bearing on the submarine, but the Ghost is still 400 feet beneath the thermocline, invisible, untouchable, and perfectly patient. Even if the Iranian decoys successfully hit the water, the American fire control technician sits 7 miles away, securely connected via the guidance wire, ready to manually override the seeker's brain and steer the weapon past the noise, directly into 1,500 tons of real steel. 5:1 local time. The kinetic interception is dictated purely by the cold laws of physics. The Mark 48 ADCAP does not aim for the hull. It does not need a direct impact to kill. As the weapon reaches its terminal point, it passes directly beneath the Iris Denna's keel, the structural spine of the ship. The warhead's magnetic influence fuse, sensing the massive distortion in the Earth's magnetic field caused by 1,500 tons of Iranian steel, triggers the detonation. The explosion creates a localized vacuum, a superheated gas bubble that expands upward with immense focused kinetic force. This is the void effect. For a fraction of a second, the middle of the Denna's hull is lifted clean out of the Indian Ocean by a wall of expanding gas. The bow and stern hang suspended in the air, their structural members bearing a gravitational load no naval architect ever designed them to carry. Then, the inevitable physics of the abyss take over. The gas bubble collapses. The water that was displaced rushes back into the vacuum with the force of 1,000 sledgehammers. The stern falls. The bow twists. The keel, the very backbone of the frigate, snaps like a steel ruler bent beyond its limits. The sound is not just an explosion. It is the screech of thousands of rivets, shearing, and structural bulkheads imploding under the weight of the sea. 94 meters of Iranian naval engineering is effectively folded in half. Seawater, pressurized and unforgiving, floods the engine rooms and ammunition magazines in seconds. There is no slow sinking, no dramatic listing to the side. The Iris Denna, once a symbol of regional power, becomes a collection of sinking scrap metal, slipping beneath the surface of the Indian Ocean at a rate of 10 meters per second. The Atlantic-born Predator has finished its work. 5:8 local time. The Indian Ocean surface has ironed itself out, erasing the thermal scars of the eruption. High above, a KH-11 reconnaissance satellite registers a fading infrared bloom, a heat signature categorized in a windowless room in Fort Meade as confirmed kinetic interdiction. There are no survivors to debrief, no life rafts to pinpoint, and no black boxes to recover from the silt 2,000 meters below. The 1,500-ton Iris Dena has not just sunk, it has been deleted from the global order of battle. Below the surface, the Los Angeles-class submarine does not celebrate. There are no cinematic cheers, only the clinical execution of post-strike cleanup. The captain gives a quiet nod. The boat slips back into the abyss, diving through the warming upper layers to find the dark sanctuary below the 400-foot thermocline. The nuclear reactor hums with an indifferent vibration, providing the silent energy required to vanish. The towed array, hundreds of feet of sensor cable, continues to stream behind the boat, undisturbed. To the fire control computers, the last 40 minutes were not a battle. They were a routine integration of kinetic variables. The Dena's final acoustic signatures, its frantic emergency pings, and the precise, bone-crushing sound of its hull's collapse have been archived. This digital ghost will be fed into the Navy's threat library, turning a violent destruction into a strategic asset for every American commander in the Pacific. 5:20 local time. The submarine is now 10 miles from the debris field. In the galley, the smell of fresh coffee replaces the ozone of the control room. The engagement is now a line of encrypted code, a silent testament to a ghost that never existed, in a war never declared. The abyss remains the only witness to the Dena's final scream. The board is reset. The ocean is empty. Mission complete.